You did register, wasn't it?
I told you. Matt Richardson. There's nothing on it.
He was down.
Good.
He's really so good.
Is it not?
He was, and I think it was all his emails. It was that every time. Yes, it really does, but I just, it would be nice just to get my friends.
But let's check it, I forget.
Yeah.
Right, good evening.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Services. We've got some visitors tonight, and I guess that they introduced themselves at the point that we're going to be dealing with that issue. Otherwise, you'll never remember till the end anyway. So we'll make sure everyone knows who everybody is as we go through. So I'm Carol Coburn, I chair this, and on my left is Philip Townsend, who's my vice chair. And the other members of the committee, they can introduce themselves when they speak, but we have Councillor Jane Austen, Councillor Busby and Councillor Long. So, but they can, oh, sorry, Councillor. Sorry. So let's move straight on then, please. Apologies for absence. I know we've got a
Thank you,
few.
Chair. We have apologies from Councillor George Hess, Councillor Jackie King, Councillor John Rubini, and potentially Councillor Graham White, who hasn't turned up yet.
Could I give an apology for presence? Because I was due not to be here, but I was actually meeting folded at the last meeting.
Well, we're delighted you are here, Councillor Monroe, so that's all worked out well. The minutes of the meeting, do you approve it's okay if I sign the minutes of the last meeting as a true record? And declarations of interest, does anyone have any to declare at this moment? No? Are there any questions from the members of the public, Kim?
Long received.
We do have some questions from members, or a member, Councillor Hess, who is not with us, and Councillor White, who was going to put the questions, is also not with us. So I think we can cope with this. Do we need to have them read out? Are they fully written out in the?
Yes, that's
the
what you
agenda?
have there on your agenda front sheet is the entire question that was submitted by Councillor Hess. I believe I should look at those, time to prepare a response. I'll be able to read them out if that'd be helpful, or
I don't think it should be necessary. If everyone's got the agenda, just the first question is about plans and the drawings. Claire, have you got an answer tonight, or are you?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to just confirm this is an area of work we are focusing on. There's a service improvement group that's been established, and we're looking at a number of different areas around the sort of technical admin support side of the business to make sure that we're actually fit for purpose and that we're actually presenting information in a way that's both usable and understandable to our customers, members, etc. So this is one of the areas that we are working on.
Right. Yes, I mean, it is difficult when the drawings are inaccurate, but
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes things change, don't they? But if we are working on it, then that's fine.
Absolutely.
And we'll make sure Councillor Hess is told about that. The second one is a slightly different question, and it was on something that we discussed way back in November. So I don't know if you have an answer, Claire, to tell us about Waverley Conservation Historic Buildings.
Yes, so I think the question is sort of a little bit around capacity in the team and focus on conservation and historic building work. So there is some additional capacity that's being created or is being created within the team. Now, that capacity won't necessarily just start producing further conservation areas or within the borough, but it will be focusing on supporting both conservation objectives within the borough, supporting the preservation and protection of historic building, but also will support people looking to do work on listed buildings, people coming to the council for advice, and also as part of the sort of the planning application side of the business, people coming in with applications that impact or affect the setting of conservation areas for listed buildings.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, I know Councillor Hess isn't here, and I don't like to put words into their mouths, but into people's mouths if they're not here. But I do think there is a point here that we've raised before, as you mentioned here, you flagged it up in November. And that is that we feel a group of members that perhaps we don't apply our own policy rigidly enough in conservation areas. So I wonder if you would mind if we could just make a recommendation sort of to you and to the executive. I had a good look at everybody else's, well, as many as I could read, shopfront guides. And one of the issues we have in Waverley is that a lot of our conservation areas are our shopping areas. So shop fronts are crucial. You know, I think we have more success in our conservation areas dealing with residential than we perhaps do with the retail. I have read our own shop front guide, and it's pretty much the same as everybody else's shop front guide, because there isn't a lot you can say. But I do think we don't always perhaps apply what we've got in there, and the vocabulary is a little bit weak. We prefer, and I'm not sure that residents prefer, they like something a bit stronger. So could I put a recommendation in that we do, as part of the local plan update, review the shopfront guide with a possibility of strengthening the wording in it. I don't think there's much work needs to be done, but if we could just review the wording. But I also think the second part of the recommendation would be to, you know, apply any policy that we do have rigidly.
Okay.
And I come back to poor old Oliver Bonus. I mean, they must think I've got a big thing about them, but in Farnham, we have a shop that was never a thing of great beauty. It was Millet's before, I think it was Millet's immediately before. And it is just pink. Everything about it is pink, you know, the store eyes, everything, you know, that they haven't defined any part of the shop front at all. And I can remember when I queried this, the officer said, oh, but it's millennium pink, you know, it's perfectly acceptable. Well, within reason, I don't mind a bit of pink, but it was just the whole thing. And I think, you know, when we've got a historic conservation areas we have in Farnham, and I'm sure it applies to the other towns as well, we should be looking at shop fronts critically. And if we have the powers, then I think we should be a little stricter, because certainly Farnham's conservation area is looking scruffy.
Okay, so
Shop fronts.
yeah, definitely take that away, but I think it's probably worth just advising the committee this evening that, you know, as we go into the next local plan, SPGs driven by national legislation will disappear from the planning system if the planning system continues to change in the way envisaged at the moment. And also we will be working on design codes, and I'm quite certain that design codes, local design codes, will want to pick up shop fronts as part of that and that conservation. So rather than sort of anybody leaving this evening thinking that we're going to prioritise rewording SDGs and so forth, I think the whole matter needs to be looked at in the round in the context of the changes that will come about in the planning system and the changes that will drive through as part of the local plan.
Yes,
review.
that's fine. That's very clear. It's just, you know, I feel that our wording in our preservation documents can be toughened. And as you say, if that's under the design code, that's fine.
Yeah, but also just this evening, you know, if members have examples where we think we haven't properly applied policy, then please by all means come to me individually with those examples so that I can actually use those to just have a sort of professional discussion with my officers and help to improve their understanding.
Because we did think about a task and finish group, and the two volunteers were myself and Councillor Hess, and we hadn't actually met. We have tried and said, I'll give you a ring and we'll sort something out. But, you know, I think it is an area where there's a lot of interest, and if we can input into whatever document goes forward, whether it's the local plan, whether it's the design code, then I think it will improve I hope, the look of all our conservation areas.
Yeah, but if
Yeah.
there are some live examples
Yeah.
given to me, I hold lots of workshops to all the staff and they're all very keen to learn. So that would be a really, really good dialogue that we could have with us.
That's lovely. Thanks, Claire. Thanks very much indeed. Anybody else want to say anything? I think we'll wait and see, but you know, if you have got any examples, I think put them in Claire as quickly as possible. Thank you. The committee forward work programme, I don't want to waste too much time on this. My only thought for what I would like is to be kept up to speed with things like, I'm talking a preliminary way, the Corfu sites where that's gone, and you know, Dunsfold Park, the major items that will inform, if you like, the spatial strategy and the rest of the boroughs allocation. So I think, you know, if there is something, we could add that. And we have just 2 other items in June. It's looking a little bit quiet. So if anybody does have an idea, and one of the items on tonight came from Councillor Munro. So, you know, if we do have suggestions for an item that you'd like to see on the agenda, please do let us know straight away. Then, anybody got anything they want to add now? No, right, let's move on then to if you like, one of the important bits of the evening, which is the Safer Waverley Partnership. We've sort of mentioned it 2 or 3 times since this committee met, and we've gradually sort of got more and more interested as people have got to understand. So I'm delighted that you could all come tonight. I would start with David, you're really coming to the PSP, aren't you? So should we start with Sam?
Yeah.
You could introduce yourselves and go around that way.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Hutchison. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm the Executive Head for Communities. And within that scope is the responsibility for community safety. We're talking about the Safer Waverley Partnership tonight. And 3 of the team are here who are fabulous. So there's Eve Budd, who's our community safety officer. There's Katie, who is our community services manager, and David, who is our ASB person, which is so. And I just want to say thank you very much for the work that they've done for this plan to share with you tonight, and also the support they've given in helping me introduce this this item. Also, perhaps on the call, I hope on the screen, as well as around the table, are some of the partners and the key stakeholders in the Safer Waverley Partnership that we thought it would be great for you to meet. So, Inspector Rob Bryan.
Evening, Rob Bryan. I'm the Borough Commander for Waverley. So I've got a neighbourhood team downstairs and then oversee the response element in terms of looking after them while they're inspectors at Guildford.
Thanks, Rob. And we also, I hope, have Louise Gibbons. Hello, Louise.
Yeah, you do. I'm Louise Gibbons from the Community Safety Team at Surrey County Council.
Thank you, Louise. And I think we might have Helen as well. I'm not sure if we've got Helen.
No,
Helen sent her already. So Helen Milton is also a key part of the partnership, and she's the designated nurse for safeguarding adults, and she represents the NHS at Surrey Heartlands on the partnership. And Kika, Councillor Morellis, is also on the partnership. And we have Matt Richardson, who has given his apologies, who is the station commander for Surrey Fire and Rescue Services. So just explaining those key partners for you can tell, explain the breadth of the partnership and the depth of activity. So the point of the discussion is to introduce the report, which starts on page 27 of your agenda pack. And it provides you with the opportunity to scrutinise the work, and that is really important to us, of Waverley's Community Safety Partnership. That's known locally as Safer Waverley Partnership. You'll note that the report outlines the partnership's statutory duties and functions and details some of the partnership's activities, achievements and challenges over the last year. You'll note that there is a detailed action plan and end of year status in Annex 1. And I think I'd really like to reiterate, as we did last time we met, that this is really important, that the partnership work is delivered in addition to the day-to-day functions of each of our partners and ourselves around this table. And I think it's very important to flag that all agencies at this time are dealing with financial and staffing challenges. And hence that is going to have an impact on some of the delivery opportunities that we have and the strategic objectives that we set as to what is reasonable and what is possible. I think to kind of highlight as well that the multi-agency groups in the partnership, which can, convince themselves of community harm and risk management meeting, which is CHARM, the Joint Action Group, JAG, they make up the core delivery arm and the core delivery mechanisms of the partnership working. They're vital. There's a lot of work in supporting those groups to happen. The team here are vital in terms of chairing, organisational support, etc. So we take on a lot to enable that delivery to take place. And you can see the activity of these groups in the report, and it's detailed under 7.9 and 7.10. I'd like to draw the attention of the committee as well to the fact that we've seen increasing numbers of requests for antisocial behaviour review applications, particularly over the last 2 to 3 years, many of which are more complex than ever in nature. It's never just one issue. There is always a multiple background to some of the issues that are coming up. I think it would be fair to say, and colleagues will be able to add to this in a minute, that any antisocial behaviour situation is very rarely absent of a safeguarding concern, is very rarely absent of a nuisance problem, very rarely easy to enforce. So it's bliss. But it's a serious challenge for the partnership. And again, not just because they're sat here, but the complexities are dealt with really well by this team, and the subtleties and putting people first at the heart of what we're trying to achieve. And that's a really important culture this team have at the heart, and the partnership has as well. The council has recognised the need to provide a greater resource into ASB, and that's why we have David with us, as there now is a dedicated ASB officer because of these rises in issues and complexities. And David will be talking later on in the agenda specifically about the PSPO and the relationship to antisocial behaviour that has. As you would expect, the partnership keeps domestic violence at the core. It's a really important priority, and we support partners such as Southwest Domestic Violence Services to help in situations like that, but domestic abuse as well is our key focus, one of our key focuses. It's important to note that whilst Waverley is a safe borough, it is recognised that some communities and residents will experience harm and from crime and ASB, and this is why the partnership is so essential. And it focuses on the crime types where a maximised response can be made by partnership working, and that has to be focused by all of our resources and finances available to us. So again, challenging time, but recognising where the needs are and how we need to focus on that. The partnership draft plan for 24 to 27 is in Annex 2, and the committee is asked to comment on the plan and provide any observations or recommendations for the responsible authorities of the Safer Waverley Partnership to consider, and partners are here to answer any of your questions. I think I would just finish by saying there is appetite by the partnership to work together across, possibly at an executive level, both authorities, Guildford and Waverley, while keeping the sovereign nature of delivery. And that is because, again, of resources, it's often the same people across the same quadrants. And therefore, utilising that to be most efficient would be something that we would need to look at, but not do something that would damage the sovereign nature of any partnership. So yeah, that's the introduction. I hope that helps a little bit, and then I'll hand over to the experts now, and you can not hear my voice anymore. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Sam. That was really interesting. As indeed was all the papers, once I got used to the initials and all there's a whole new language there. Does anybody else wish to speak before we throw it open to questions?
Yeah.
Thank you, Eve.
Right. So does anybody want to kick off some questions? Councillor Monroe.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions.
Yeah,
but
that's fine. No,
I don't need to hog the floor for a long time.
Hop away,
It's my turn. No particular order. I see that the community trigger has now been renamed antisocial behaviour case review. Isn't this a rather retrograde step? I mean, community trigger had a much more sort of zingy name to it. And one of the disadvantages, in my experience of community trigger, is that no one knows about it. And if they didn't know about community trigger, how come they're going to know about the antisocial behaviour case review? But my main question is, what steps are the Safer Waverley Partnership taking actually to make it more widely known?
I can answer an issue about the community triggers change of name. That's nothing obviously to do with us. That's been within the legislation. It's had a change in name. So obviously we have to apply that change in name. So it's now been called the Antisocial Behaviour Review. I mean, for us, it's about publicising it. It's about when we do get phone calls now or complex cases, that is a course of action that can be taken. It's taken most probably a little while for us to promote it, isn't it, to our complex cases, but it is being more and more utilised. They have increased. I mean, we're seeing a regular applicants coming in. Not all applicants will meet the threshold, but then that doesn't mean you won't apply a problem-solving actions against any review that comes in. We look at each one individually, but it's advertised on our website as we requested to do. And I think certainly we did quite a lot in one of the ASB weeks. And David, I don't know if you want to sort of say about any more promotion of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of promotion going to be directed via the police commissioner. Their office is very involved in making sure that it is publicised, and there should be a lot more advertising around that. They play quite a significant role in ensuring that it's done properly. And yeah, it's not just about meeting the criteria and then looking at what you've got. There's no reason why you can't be more proactive about it and actually identify issues that you might think would benefit from the case review. In fact, the last case review we did, it didn't hit the threshold, but we felt that it was right to actually treat it as a case review. And talking about complexity, it's probably one of the most complex ones we've had to deal with. So we offered ourselves up and put a lot of time and effort into it. So I think ASB case review is the right term. Community trigger is it's we're all going to feel differently about how names go, but I think it is the right thing. We just need to make sure people know it's there and that we're there as a proactive resource, as a partnership to actually deal with it.
And as we all know, getting people to notice things that aren't immediately part of their lives is very, very difficult. When they need the help, then it's a different thing. Councillor Busby?
Thank you, Chair.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Monroe, for the next half dozen.
Yeah, I guess as a ward councillor, it's always a bit tricky to know how proactively we should be encouraging people to take up that offer. And I think there's also a bit of a barrier in people thinking, oh, do I meet the criteria? Do I not meet the criteria? But equally, we don't want to flood you with 3 times the number that you've already got. Unless you have capacity to take on double the number that you're dealing with currently.
I think it's always worth, if you've got concerns within any of your neighbourhoods, any of the wards, is to send either, I would say, David or Eve an email, and we will always look at a problem. I mean, I say David mainly with the antisocial behaviour. And we can always take a look, because there's other mechanisms that it might form part of. It might be that actually there is an element that needs to go to our community harm risk management meeting, which is our individuals. It might be a perpetrator, it might be a victim, and we can do some more work with. So it, rather than necessarily saying to somebody, why don't you apply for the ASB case review, get them to speak to us first, and then we can also talk them through, because they have to, there is a criteria that they need to meet and fill in the form, and we can help that. We had one the other day, is it a private rented situation, there was ASB, and actually by working with the victim, we were actually able to sort of deal with it without it becoming an ASB case review. So, do please, we're here as a team, email us, phone us, we will always see what we can do proactively in advance. But if it does get very complex, it is the absolute route to go, because it brings us as partners to the table, it makes us all look at what we've been doing previously, and then maybe what we could do collectively going forward. What we can't always solve is sometimes neighbours just don't get on. It's not necessary that we can completely solve it, because we are dealing with individuals who don't necessarily get on. But yeah, do feel free to just sort of give us an email call.
The final part of that, the earlier the better, to be honest, because the longer you go into something, the more complex it becomes and the more difficult it becomes to actually deal with. So sometimes the one that you were just talking about, the rent, we got in quite early, we were able to deal with it and resolve it within a month.
I think the key to it is it's three or it's the sort of threshold is 3 or more incidents of antisocial behaviour reported in the last 6 months, and the problem is still continuing. So if you're speaking to sort of residents and they're saying, "Oh, I've just reported it once," then that's probably not going to meet the threshold. So the key is encourage that reporting, and the application is very sort of simple and straightforward. It won't take them long to do it. So I mean, it will come in to David and myself, and we will always have a look at it. And it might be that we can just sort of provide some initial advice and sort of say you could try this, and then if the problem still does continue, then they can put in another act.
I did try and look on the Waverley website to see if I could find you people, and I did struggle.
Okay.
Well,
we can feed that back to our
if a resident had an issue, would they even know where to go? They might go straight to the police, as opposed to thinking, actually, it's a housing association issue within Waverley, then can I come to Waverley and how can I resolve that, please?
It is on there, but I think that's something we can raise with
It is on there. I did find it, but it was.
We'll pick it up with the comms team. That's not.
The partnership has had stronger publicity in the past. I can remember it from way back. I don't know if there are Eva remembers, but we did actually get out about. Money was slightly more free, and we did actually have quite a high profile out in the community. To tell people, but it is something we've got to look at.
I mean, it's one thing I think we did touch on earlier, but officers, we encourage all partner officers, housing officers, police officers, if they're aware of, come across people that they feel that you should put an application for an ASB case review in, they do encourage them, and the inspectors team kept me very busy last summer with his various applications, so much so that I did offer to sort of do some training amongst the team around what would be appropriate for them to recommend, because some of them weren't quite appropriate, but we did manage to help a lot of people. But yes,
which is really the aim of the whole thing.
It is. So it is.
But I'll pick that up with our comms
that would be great if you would.
With the promotion.
Councillor Monroe, would you like to go with your second?
Thank you very much. As David Hollingsworth and hopefully Rob will know, there is an antisocial behaviour problem in the Thursley Common leading up to the Punch Bowl. It's basically bikers and 4x4s not keeping to the tracks, or even actually they cause a problem even if they do keep to the boats. And as you know, we walked round, David, and we had a very helpful
Archie Ridley.
Archie, I couldn't remember the name, but he was extremely helpful. What the parish council have been pressing for, as you will know, is a joint action group, because nobody's under any illusion this is not an easy problem to solve. And I was told that actually a joint action group wasn't appropriate. And anyway, a JAG didn't exist, but because it was the Safer Waverley Partnership. But I see in these documents here that it's a sort of subgroup thing. So I'm confused, and that's
So
question
JAG
one. And
exists,
question
yeah.
two is, what can we do to keep the pressure up on reducing ASB in that area? And I'm not assuming that's the only area. I'm sure there are other areas. It happens to be the one I know about.
Yeah, so JAG exists, so anything, if it would be a joint action task and finish group. That's what you do when you've got a complex neighbourhood problem. So we don't have routine JAG task and finish groups. It's once they've come to our JAG and we feel that it needs more intensity put into it, because our JAGs only meet every 6 weeks and they obviously cover a lot of issues. I know David has already been out and spoken to you about what could be done to begin with on that. So I don't know where you got to, but this JAG exists, it's a JAG task and finish groups that are separate, and we don't have a JAG task and finish group around the Thursley Common.
So if we've all got, things that like David, as examples of antisocial behaviour, what do we do?
So they wouldn't necessarily all go on to a JAG meeting. It would depend. They need to be nominated, but they need to be nominated by one of the professionals in the room, either by the police or by David. And they would look at them, and then they would look at the intelligence behind what we've had in the way of reporting, what complaints we've had in from residents. So we need that information, and that's why reporting is so important to us. Actually, I shouldn't answer anymore, because actually Bob chairs JAG, so he can do a bit more of what we're looking for when we get a nomination.
I think it is in terms of that. It's reports of incidents, what's causing issues within the areas, and then what's been done in the past versus what we could potentially do in the future. So there's always stuff that can be looked at. Obviously, it will come to JAG and be looked at and seen. It could be adopted to the agenda, it might not be adopted, depending on what the issues are. There's not much more. That's the sort of process as to how it is. In terms of, I know that it doesn't necessarily have to go to JAG to go anywhere, because you've had Archie and obviously David working on the issue as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to go to JAG. There's a lot of stuff that I will work with David on outside of a JAG meeting, because it's still achieving its purpose. It doesn't need to be in that forum, but we recognise it needs to be looked at in another forum. And that's how it sort of works.
So as members, what are we supposed to do? I mean, what are we not doing now? What should we be doing more of?
As members, if you have issues in your community that you think need a multi-agency approach, or to at least look at it, and particularly around antisocial behaviour, I would send David an email of what the problem is to begin with, and then we can look behind we can work with the police and look at the data of it, or if it's a fire, we can work with the fire and rescue service. So, but we need that information to begin with. Not everything will go straight on to a joint action group meeting. And it's the same if we have an individual, they won't necessarily go straight onto a community harm and risk management meeting. What we'll be looking at is what work can we do collectively before it needed that more intense multi-agency approach. So there's an awful lot of work that goes on outside of these meetings. They are part of it, but what I wouldn't say is the work happens so much outside of meetings, but we need to know, need the evidence.
Yes, I mean, this is, I think, what came out of the report, wasn't it? The sheer amount of work that's going on in the background that, you keep very quiet about, or far too quiet about. And I'm delighted that you're here now to shine a light on what you do, because it is quite breathtaking when you see the areas that you cover and the amount of partnership work that's going on. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just in terms of a direct answer in relation to Thursley, we did talk about it. I think the reason it's not going on to JAG is it's a much wider issue in terms of bringing in National Trust, rather than a whole range of different people bring in. It's a whole range of different skills that might not actually suit what our police colleagues might do and some of the other colleagues on JAG. So it's something we're going to approach through a partnership, but it will be a different type of partnership. It could end up as a task and finish group, but it might not necessarily fit within JAG.
Madam Chair, if I may, thank you, just to support what the team is saying, and I think this is a difficult message in some ways for councillor colleagues, that sometimes there isn't a solution. And I think we need to have an element of realism that once we have gone through as much as we possibly can and have communicated with partners, it might be that we just can't fix it. And I think there is an element of reality around that, because if we are looking, as David rightly says, that is out of Rob's realm, and we're now moving into national trust and all the rest of it, they will ultimately come to the table with an expediency question. And that expediency we can't influence. They are an external authority. We can only work on partnerships. So as much as, with all the will in the world and the greatest amount of respect, it might be a serious topic for us. If they think it's not expedient, we're not going anywhere. And I think we just have to acknowledge that reality, that we will do as much as we can to influence. But I think anyone that's had any experience, without prejudice, of Surrey County Council, for example, and some of the enforcement on land or whatever, it's a disaster zone. It's a nightmare. They will decide what they believe to be expedient, and we have to kind of go along with that, and that will extend to other partners. So if there isn't any traction, or if it hasn't gone onto a group, or if it hasn't got a joint task force, that isn't necessarily our choice or perception. We can only go so far as a partnership is going to allow us to. And like I say, everyone is under a tremendous amount of pressure. I'm not excusing it, but it is that. So I wouldn't want you to think that the power rests with us at all times. It doesn't.
No, thank you for bringing reality in. But when we see the difference you've made to, to one life, it's worth doing, isn't it? And if you can sort of spread it. So, but we do take on board that you're not miracle workers, you're just very skilled people. Yes, Councillor Monroe.
I think what I've just heard in the last 5 minutes is a very powerful argument for actually establishing a JAG, because as you rightly say, it's not, there are a host of large landowners. There's Natural England, the National Trust, there's the MOD. Is not a JAG that a good mechanism for getting them all around the table. And J stands for joint. So the more complex problem is, and it is complex and difficult, the more I think a JAG should be looked at seriously to try and solve it.
I totally hear what you're saying, Councillor Moreau, and there is nothing that we would love to do more in that sense. But what I'm trying to say in that is that the logic of having a joint action group with multi-agencies is a desire. It might not be a reality, and that reality might not rest because of us. So as much as you think it's amazing, I think it would be amazing if they're not coming around the table because they have what they perceive to be higher pressures. We have to acknowledge that reality might be that. I know that's not the message that maybe you and your residents want to hear, but that is a reality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to fall under a JAG, it can be a task and finish group. That's what we're saying. It's not necessarily have to be.
There was a very successful one at French and Common, for instance, which I think is let's not be negative, it's been a real success story. 4 years ago, there were real problems there. Vandalism, too many fires, all that sort of thing. And the problems haven't gone away, but they have been markedly diminished due to the work of the rangers and everybody else.
And we took that outside of a JAG, it became just a task and finish group. So, again, it worked, but it was, the countryside team wanted it to take it outside of the Safer Waverley Partnership remit, and they wanted to create a task and finish group to create a wider responsibility.
So my last word on this, can we do a French on Thursday?
That's
I'm
David
undertaking to do that. Once I get people round the table that can actually help us address the issues.
Right, thank you, David. Councillor Austin, you have a question?
Thank you. I will be in touch actually.
We've been trying, haven't we?
Been trying, yeah. This is all this exact stuff. I was just going to put forward as a new councillor. This is brilliant, and I'm learning all about this. I think I'm probably not alone in not really knowing how all of this works. So I was just going to recommend some training or an awareness course for all of the councillors, especially the new ones. This is really great to hear.
Sorry, we used to do that. I just reminded me, how did we do it?
I was just trying to think how we used to do it.
We used to do it twofold. When it was almost like an annual, we would do a partnership. We used to be very creative, where we'd actually had councillors come in and we'd have the different partners with stands and talk through their role in the partnership, but that ends up proving more challenging as staff resources. But we used to come in and do a presentation at the same time, and that's throwing Rob on the spot, then the police used to present their sort of yearly plan as well at the same time. I don't know if you do that anymore, but we did used to do something. We can miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
we
this
did.
issue, I'm dealing with police and then, but there was other
Yeah.
issues and I haven't been knowing
Yeah, no,
exactly
we
where
can-
to go to, so this is
Yeah.
good to.
We'll put it in as part of our recommendation.
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
can
we did it
look
through at the beginning like a council meeting.
Yeah.
I think some of our problem in the end was we used to not get as many turn up, so encouragement to turn up would be good. Yeah.
And just finally, if that's okay, I don't know where this falls in, but certainly, I believe there used to be a liaison with the travelling community. And I don't know, where does that fall now? Is that
We've never
right
had
or
one.
wrong?
So
That's
Waverley have never had a
Okay.
gypsy liaison officer. In Guildford, I used to do that.
Okay.
I think now Surrey County Council have a gypsy traveller unit in terms of they will deal with enforcement of unauthorised encampments that are on their land. If the unauthorised encampment happens on our land, we would have to deal with it, and that usually happens through the enforcement team.
Yes.
In terms of liaison with residents, there are no sites in Guildford, public sites, there are only private sites up in the Cranley Way. There is no public site liaison, again, so there is no housing liaison here because there isn't the need, because there isn't a public site. If a traveller happens to be a customer in terms of a tenancy or any other issue, that would be done in the same way that anybody would be managed. So depending on what the need is of the gypsy traveller community, we can point you in the right direction of where that needs to go, if that helps at all.
There is an advocacy group, because we've had the advocacy on this latest
Friends, families and travellers.
family travellers, so we can invite them to advocate.
They're a Brighton based.
Yeah, we don't have a.
Before I take any more questions, can we see if Louise has got
Yeah.
anything? She'll be sitting up there. Occasionally we throw out sorry and other words like that. So Louise, would you like to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as point of interest in relation to Gypsy and Roma travellers, there is the Surrey.
Forum.
Bear with me, I just need to get the terminology right. It's the Surrey Gypsy Traveller Communities Forum, which is a partnership group made up of various different traveller groups, but there also are statutory agencies represented on that. So one of my colleagues, Nikki Parkhill, who's one of our equalities and diversity leads, actually sits on the board of that group. So we do have links into the Gypsy traveller community through that. And we do lots of awareness raising and education around sort of like cultural understanding and differences. So we do have links there if you wanted to explore them further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. It's very helpful. Does anybody else have any further questions?
A few years back, and perhaps still now, the sort of hot spot in Waverley as far as ASB was concerned, I think was Farncombe. I don't know whether there's any Farncombe cats, I don't tread on toes, but I don't know why, but it was.
Still is.
That's
what the PSP
is. Right, that's true, yeah. But shall we leave it till?
Yeah, because David's going to speak on that.
And my last question is the Neighbourhood Dispute Action Group, I think NDAG.
NDAG, yeah.
NDAG, right. I understand it wasn't working and therefore it's been cancelled. But I see it still actually in our full programme.
That's the one from the one from last year with the end of year status in there. So no, it's not in the sort of the new structure for this coming rolling 3 years.
I mean, you've got to try these things, and some things don't work. I appreciate that. Any thought being given to anything that might replace it in a more effective way?
When I looked at it, what happened was it actually goes full circle to, as it was, Community Trigger. Recommendations came back from that, which were then to be owned by the NDAG, which didn't sit right because it was actually a different agency that owned all the actions. So we looked at it and its purpose, and actually it fell into an area that didn't need to exist in between Charm and Jag. And actually everything that was on that naturally fell into one of those two areas, more substantial meetings with more people around the table. So that middle ground was removed, which didn't remove any assistance to any of the disputes that were going into it. They just went into a more appropriate forum. So it was, for that purpose, it cut time down and actually served better in terms of what we provided to victims.
And so for example, obviously, if you've got perpetrators of antisocial behaviour or victims, you would put them on the community harm and risk management meeting. If you've got a location that's very sort of complex, we would look to put that onto the JAG.
But how long does it take you to learn all the vocabulary? And when you go home at night, did your family get a whole load of acronyms going at them, you know? But, oh, sorry. Councillor White, welcome.
You're on mute.
Yes, done it now. Yes, apologies everybody for my late arrival. It wasn't for the wish of trying. I was obviously had a corrupted Zoom link. Quite painful, but nice to see you all. And thank you for sending me the link. So we got it. We discussed this fairly recently at Farnham Town Council, and a question has arisen. We recognise that as far as the public space protection orders are concerned, they relate to Waverley-owned property, and that's totally understood. So from the point of view of Farnham's owned property or property that it looks after, we, as I understand it, have to paddle our own canoe and get our own cover arranged, which I understand is quite a lengthy process to go through.
Can I just interrupt you, Councillor White? I wouldn't normally, but Katie is shaking her head. So could I just get her to just reply to what you said already about property?
Yes.
Yeah, so a public space protection order is not around property, it's around an area. So the Farncombe Godalming one that is being renewed, extended at the moment, is around the whole area. So it's not around property, it's around that area where antisocial behaviour is happening. So it's across that whole space. With Farnham, we are very aware that there's been an increase in antisocial behaviour, and we can still apply. We could apply for for a PSPO in that area if we felt we had exhausted every other means, and that's what we try and look at when we did the public space protection order with the Farncombe area. We had exhausted everything that we were looking at doing, and it was sort of an added to be able to really tackle the problem. But there was a lot of other work going on behind the scenes of the public space protection order. So yeah, they're not buildings, they're areas. And also we can look at any area where there is significant antisocial behaviour. What we wouldn't want to do is a blanket approach of PSPOs, you know, just like PSPO, the whole of Waverley. What we try and do is look at the area and look at the problem, because your PSPO should be targeted to solve that problem that you've got in that area. So, you know, if we were, say, seeing a lot of arson fires in the Farnham area, we would shape that PSPO to focus on that area if we were going to do that. But again, we would still need all the reporting, we would need all the evidence data to be able to get it through that committee process and get the application. We'd need that sort of support. But yeah, they're not buildings or anything, and they're possible to do, you know, if there was a real reason and need to do that. So yeah, David, you might.
I hope that's helpful, Graham. Sorry, White, but
I understand that. Sorry, my reference to property is as in ownership, not buildings, just property ownership. So, you know, Waverley obviously owns property. There may or may not be buildings on it. I'm just talking about the area. My question really relates to Brightwells, where, you know, we've got a very large, quite a large area, a very intensification of density of population, which is shortly going to come online to Waverley, we hope in August this year, and nothing yet has been said about crime and security of that area. We are already experiencing some problems. We're kind of dealing with it locally, but my understanding is that the benefit of having PSPO is that the police have they have more license to operate in those areas and you know what do you call it? I don't want to say arrest, but necessarily, but at least restrict this sort of activity. Whereas if you don't have that cover, then their ability to act is greatly reduced. Is that correct?
Councillor White, you've got Rob now shaking his head.
Well, Rob was with us actually at Farnham, I think.
Let me answer those if you would.
Yeah, in terms of does it give us more powers, there is obviously if someone is breaching that PSPO, but it doesn't. We would look for substantial powers first in terms of actual crimes, actual offences, because that's what carries much more weight in terms of dealing stuff. I think we spoke about it with Whitley area as well in terms of does a PSPO in an area get police to that area just for the purpose of it having a PSPO? No, it doesn't. We go where the crime happens, where the incident's been reported. So it's not I think it was initially seen as a way of getting police to somewhere, because if you phone up and say I've got a PSPO in this area and there's people there, that we would respond quicker. It doesn't. It works on a threat, harm, risk and looking at what has come in as a job. So no, in terms of it doesn't give us more police powers, there is an ability for it to be recorded as a breach of PSPO, which we would then work with David with regards to that.
Because I do want to take the PSPO thing straight after this item rather than break it up, so that it sort of flows in rather naturally. But David, if you want to.
Just a number of points that come out of that. Thank you. The issues in Farnham, I've been speaking with Councillor Maurice on those. We've actually looking to set up a meeting soon to talk to the town council to see actually what the issues are, how we might best be able to approach them. So certainly what Casey was saying earlier, it's about that early understanding of what might need to happen there. So that's there. And Rob's quite right about the PSPO. It doesn't give you any more powers per se. It just gives you a different way of working. And the example I'd give you, and I can talk about that in the PSPO part, is in Farncombe. They've actually used the PSPO very rarely. It is there as an additional tool that they can use to encourage people to behave in a different way. But the actual PSPO itself hasn't really been used at all. So that's quite a different way of working.
I'd like to sort of bring, sorry David.
The final things on final things on Brightwells. I've taken quite an interest in Brightwells, and it's come up at the JAG a couple of times and we've discussed it there. The biggest issue with Brightwells at the moment is not the fact that it's an area that's going to suffer from antisocial behaviour in the future. It's suffering now because it is half building site and half residential area, and people are using it incorrectly, and it hasn't got the right security around it. The responsibility for that security sits with Crest Nicholson, and up until recently, they've chosen not to take that responsibility on. They have now put security in there, and they are dealing with it. Well, they've said they've put in security in there. But as it stands, the answer is to secure that site so that you've got building site and residential. You'll then get rid of the antisocial behaviour, it won't exist. Yeah. I'm not saying it won't in the future, but then that's part and parcel of our planning when we go forward and we talk between myself and Rob and we have those conversations.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can I come back in again? Sorry.
Briefly, because I really would like to wind this part up.
Am I in the right section here discussing this, or
probably not if you just want to concentrate on PSPOs, because we are.
I don't. I'm aware of. I don't want to delay the time. I'm aware of the conversation with Kika, and I know that's ongoing. I think David. I think. I just need to underline the fact that Brightwells is now, the residents are moving in. We're already getting, concerns from residents, and those overlap between the management company, Crest Nicholson, and we fully understand that until there is a handover, Waverley have a very restricted role. We did manage to find some bins, as you're probably aware, that we put into Brightwells because nobody else could find some. But we just need to work together on it. I, as co-leader of the town council, I am concerned that we could have, we're not looking for trouble, but I'm concerned that we need to be aware of the possibilities.
I think David is fully aware from his answer, so I don't think you've got any problem there, councillor White. Could we move now to some recommendations, because quite a few I've been noting down. First of all, I think we should recognise the success, I mean, of the original report, as it were, you know, the one that's gone. And I think, obviously convey our thanks to everybody involved. I think we have a recommendation that we should promote your work, or your work should be promoted better, whether that's the website, whether it's through councillors. I think we ought to recommend a training course. Stop me if I've making notes that people haven't spoken. I think for the future, you did say, I think, Katie, that resources are coming, but I think we should make a recommendation that, you know, resources are fully available for all the good work you do. And the items that you've mentioned, the focus on the crimes that are particular to Waverley, I think it's so important that that is fully resourced in terms of, you know, staff and money to enable this work to carry on. Is there anything else that we should add to our recommendation? Other than wish you all a long life and recommend that you can. I really do think, you know, you as I say, you have been a hidden gem just recently, and I think, well, you know, I'm sure the new councillors have been have their eyes open.
Some more to promote.
So yes, do some more, and then we as councillors should do more to, you know, get engaged and also to keep an eye on what's going on in the community and flag up anything to you as well.
I think in fairness, our heads have been down doing. But we've spent less time promoting and more time doing, isn't it?
I think we did. I was thinking back to we did usually do sort of an annual training event, but I think with sort of COVID and everything, we totally got out of the, you know, the face to face and we would all, but we've done it. You know, I've been here sort of 20 years this year, and we've done it. We've done it in very different ways, in sort of all different ways. We've done workshops. We've done. So I'm sort of thinking what we can do.
You and I handed out balloons and badges in Gosford Meadows about 20 years ago.
We did. I remember that.
And then somebody came up and told us that we had to stop giving out balloons because they were damaging cows.
And we had fleeces and things.
We had some badged uniform and everything back then. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be sort of fair to say the resource thing is a really tricky thing. I mean, when I sort of first came to Waverley, we used to receive direct funding from the Home Office to deliver partnership work, and that came every year without fail for many years. And we get nothing now. I mean, there are pots of funding available through the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, but again, being a low crime borough, we don't often have access to those that some of the more higher, you know, boroughs do have access. So it is you know, we try and do our best with the resources that we've got. But
with the increasing, sorry to jump in there, with the increasing population that we've got in Waverley and our travelling community, it is increasing by the day. And we need to try and jump on it sooner rather than later to save everybody's work and the police's work too, because otherwise their resources are going to be stretched.
Which is why our recommendation has to include, you know, sufficient resource to cover the work that's going on, especially to tackle the crime that you've raised, that is essentially the sort of crime that we have in Waverley, and also, as you say, any increase in that because of the changing population. Can I thank you all for your time? David, I'm going to take your item next, and everyone's very welcome to stay, but I will fully understand if you feel you've done your bit for the night and want to slip away.
Sure. Excuse me, sorry, can I just run through those recommendations again, just have the wording?
Oh, right.
So just...
Too shorthand, not good.
Yeah, it's improving. So it was, the committee would recommend that the work of SWP and their partners we have to promote it. So hopefully a training course for members implemented. So hopefully increase awareness among councillors of the work and that's resource how to find it, and that resources be made available for the work list.
Well, to ensure that adequate resources are available for all the work that you know the partnership has put down in the forward plan.
Okay.
It's really because you're concentrating on the three areas, and there's no point in having a plan if you haven't got it fully resourced.
Yeah.
So,
And everyone's happy with that, all the members of the committee?
anybody got
Wonderful, great.
anything else they wish to add?
That's perfect, thank you.
Right, so if we could.
Teacher director, phone numbers.
Yeah.
You can have even David.
Thanks. So if we could leap over number 8 and just go straight on to the antisocial behaviours, it seems to follow on. So David, over to you.
Thank you. David Hongshaw, I'm a social behaviour officer. As I was told to introduce myself as we went along.
Indeed.
There we are.
Thank you very much.
So the report that has been submitted is in pages 127 to 146 of the pack. I know we're jumping over quite a large section of the agenda. The report very much talks about the PSPO as it stands, the fact that it's coming up for renewal or extension as of the 21st of April or 20th of April this year. We, as a council, can look at extending it beyond the expiry date of the 20th of April for up to another 3 years if we consider it's necessary and the original behaviour is either occurring or recurring. So it's about it's not just a matter of ticking a box and saying, right, we're going to renew it. It very much is about looking at what's happened, how it's worked, and whether it's the right thing to do to continue the PSPO. The approval is given following an evaluation as to whether it's required and making sure that we do some consultation as well. And I'm going to, rather than go through all the different reports, I'm going to concentrate on that evaluation that we did and the consultation that we did, which is the bit that I would really appreciate any comments on, any feedback in relation to the report. At the end of the day, we need to, as I said, review it by the 20th of April. On the 20th of February this year, full council delegated the authority to do that to the executive head of communities. So that will be done in that week leading up to the expiry date, and then we'll be returning to full council to let them know what we've done for noting. So that's the process that we're going through at the moment. So in terms of the evaluation and the consultation, it was a very short period of time for the evaluation and consultation, mainly because we needed to make sure we got everything done in time. And legally, we only needed to go to a minimum of 2 weeks. It would have been good to have done longer, but that was where we were at the time. In terms of the evaluation, I've looked at the work of the Parks and Countryside team in relation to the second part of the PSPO, which is around barbecues and bonfires. Over the 3-year period of the PSPO, there's been somewhere in the region of 44 recorded incidents. These numbers don't sound big, but they're actually quite big when you start to look at them. Majority of in French and Ponds, and where they've been able to use the PSPO, as I said earlier on, mainly around encouragement and persuasion, and letting people know that if they don't work with us and put out barbecues or put out bonfires, it could actually take it on further. There has been fixed penalty notices issued on about 4 or 5 occasions, but for the majority of the time, people actually work with the PSPO and respect what we're trying to do there. In relation to the antisocial behaviour at Godalming and Farncombe, the PSPO has very much fallen within the arms of the police, if you like, to actually manage that area. They had the right resources to do that. We've also been able to look at youth service in that area as well, which was provided by the town council, and very much working together with the police on that. So you've got an element of carrot and stick in how you actually approach the antisocial behaviour. As I said earlier, the police have very much concentrated on using their own powers with the PSPO to back it up. But they've found that PSPO to be quite valuable because it is that conversation point that you can have about how they can modify their behaviour. So they are very supportive of what we're doing, particularly in the Farncombe area, which was the area you highlighted earlier on, but also in the Godalming area as well. In terms of how that has worked, as I said, we talked about the parks and that and the incidents there. The parks and open spaces seen a reduction of 35% over the previous 3 years in relation to the incidents that were recorded, which is quite a good reduction over that period of time. Bearing in mind, we were coming out of COVID, and the first 3 years actually had a period of COVID where people couldn't go. So actually, that's quite a good reduction if you look at it from that point. In terms of the antisocial behaviour in Farncombe, particularly, we've seen over the 3 years a reduction of about 24% in the reports that are coming in around antisocial behaviour. Need to be careful of it because we are again talking about relatively small numbers when we're looking at antisocial behaviour from year to year. But it is still a good percentage that you've seen go down. Waverley overall, recently looking at crime figures and antisocial behaviour figures, Waverley overall has seen a reduction of around about 54% in antisocial behaviour. And that is mainly recorded figures with the police. So that gives you some idea of what the changes have been over that time. And Farncombe was a challenging area, so even still that 24% reduction is a big reduction. The consultation, again, was, as I said, for a 2-week period. We did have a survey which was answered by a small number of people. And out of that, we picked up that in the Godalming and Farncombe area, that the people that replied, 53% of those had experienced or witnessed antisocial behaviour over that last year. Sounds like a big number, but we are talking about a small number of people that have replied. And I'm sure if we did that survey over a longer time, over a larger number of people, those figures wouldn't necessarily be as high as they are. But it still shows you that in those areas, there is antisocial behaviour that needs to be dealt with. The support for the prohibitions that are contained within the PSPO was quite high. 85% of those that people responded feel that those restrictions were right and were necessary for those 2 areas. And there's somewhere in the region of 93% support for the PSPO to be continued beyond the expiry date. So, and some of the comments that came back, which I think I tried to put into the report, very much around, if it's working, you shouldn't take it away. I think going forward, we need to look at how we work together more as a partnership, particularly in Godalming and Farncombe, because the PSPO isn't an end, it's a means to an end. And I think the important part there is that we do bring in other partners as well to actually look at not just resolving the antisocial behaviour that happens, but actually preventing it from happening in the future. My recommendation is going to be that we do extend the PSPO and sort of open it up now for any comments, feedback.
Peter, do you?
Yeah, I think to sort of just say alongside with the PSPO is, obviously I lived and breathed the Farncombe troubles for a few years as I chaired the task and finish group for it. Is a lot of work has gone on as well behind. We've now got as David said, the youth offer that is now there, which has been brilliant. But also what the police did as well is take a targeted approach to some of our key individuals which we haven't usually done in the past because the police do not like to criminalise young people and particularly youth, because obviously if we take them down that route, they're ending up with a criminal record. But actually we had to at that time because the impact was we nearly had South West Surrey pulling out from stopping at Milford and Godalming main station. So it got really quite hairy for us. So, so the PSPO we need to use more now going forward. But I would say what has been is we've seen the policing they took a different stance to their policing, which is again that using their powers as well to help do it. And then by putting that prevention and intervention with the youth offer in, got to say the sort of Godalming youth offer has been again sort of excellent. So it's sort of it's been a sort of wide approach to the issue.
I'm sure nobody around this table, I'd be surprised if anyone does disagree with David's recommendation. I think the bigger problem is the fact that we all want one. This came out at the last meeting, if you remember, when Councillor Gale came and spoke very eloquently about Milford and Whitley, and we've heard Councillor Busby tonight, and Councillor Monroe and Councillor Townsend, certainly at one meeting recently. So, we have problems, and it's about the appropriate sort of remedy for the particular problem, isn't it? And I think this one obviously is working in Farnham. I mean, from what we hear, but you know, it's
Yeah.
we all want one. Councillor
Thank you,
Busby.
Chair. Yeah, I do absolutely agree with your recommendation. It seems to be broadly successful, which is great. Just as part of the evaluation, and Carol saying about other areas potentially that could also benefit. But as part of the evaluation, has any potential displacement effect of antisocial behaviour from Godalming and Farncombe to places like Whitley and Milford and Chiddingfold? Has that been taken into account as part of this process?
Anecdotally, you can look at it from that point of view. There's, at the moment, and without getting too deeply into Milford and Whitley, the evidence isn't there to say that definitely those people that are causing the problem at Farncombe are now causing it at Whitley. It doesn't always work that way.
But that has been something.
There is potential. And I think the important thing is, and we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago recently, where we started to discuss Milford and Whitley. And again, very similarly to Farnham, we're going to look at what the issues are and whether PSPO is the right thing to do. The Farncombe issue is very much about Farncombe people. So it wouldn't necessarily displace things to elsewhere.
No.
Okay. However, you can't ignore that.
I mean, if
it might be
if the
because it's on the
stats-
same line. I mean, I used to work up in Elmbridge, and we had issues in Claygate where people were coming in from all over the place, mainly because they could get on a train and nobody ever worried about whether they were on the train or not. And they all used to congregate in Claygate. But that was a specific issue for Claygate. It wasn't about you were doing something at West Horsley and it was going to Claygate afterwards. And it may well be that when we actually look into this more deeply, we'll find out what is going on and why it's moving, if it's moving, and if it is being displaced.
And interestingly, we've had the Inspector O'Brien's put one of his sergeants and liaising with Councillor Gale in the parish, and that actually has mitigated some of the problems as they're dealing with the individuals, because sometimes we do need to get to the individual young people that are causing the problems. And what we have found is they're not all coming from Farncombe and things, they are coming from Guildford. So, you know, this is where we need to be, you know, it depends on what they're doing and their age groups at that time. Also, what we found with Milford, it's more around arson and fires. So it's so the antisocial behaviour is that, whereas we had a lot more around alcohol in Farncombe. We had them jumping on the trains or trying to jump on the train. So the antisocial, so any PSPO needs to be relevant to that antisocial behaviour in that area. So that's why we wouldn't look at a blanket approach, why it needs to be done. And it needs to be done with our police stats as well. So, but yeah, they are available, but I would say we'd always want to use them after we've kind of exhausted everything else.
Thank you. I can see that there have been 44 instances of unauthorised barbecues and fires, so that's section D of the order. Sections A to C, I'm presuming, are the really meaty pieces of the order. I don't know.
That's the Godalming and Farncombe.
Yeah, so, but I can't see numbers of, you were saying, I mean, 44 is not statistically significant. What kind of, you're saying you're having good outcomes, what numbers are you having in terms of, you know, you're saying police arrests, or what is it that's it's achieving? Am I not looking in the right place? Also tell me that. I don't disagree with the extension of it at all. I think it's a great idea. I'm just
I think
interested to know.
there's two parts to that answer. Firstly, I think we discussed it earlier on. The PSPO in itself isn't always being used. So the number of FPNs, I've gone forward, the number of fixed penalty notices are virtually nil.
Yeah.
In terms of what we've done in Godalming and Farncombe, because that wasn't necessarily what was required. Fining someone when actually you need to educate them and encourage them to act differently doesn't actually resolve the problem. It's there finally if you've got to that point where that person has said, I'm not playing with you. And you say, right, okay, well, then the only thing we can do is this. The figures that I quoted earlier on were very much around reports of antisocial behaviour
Of course.
reducing. So the 24% reduction in antisocial behaviour in Farncombe shows that 3 years ago, they were getting somewhere around about 60 reported incidents. Now they're getting somewhere around 40, 45. So it's different types of antisocial behaviour that are coming up. They are small numbers when you start looking at a whole year, you know, but at the same time, it shows that it is being effective from that point.
I think, yes, I don't want to prolong this too much.
Sorry,
Yes,
okay.
councillor Bradley. No, no,
Just
you are.
quickly, so if it's not the fixed penalty notices themselves, obviously there's lots of stuff going on that you don't need a PSPO to do. What is it about the PSPO, would you say, that's had the biggest impact on that? Is it just the fact that, is it that people are aware that there's the potential of a fixed penalty notice?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
prevention.
Mhm.
And in fact, that's probably a better way to work the PSPO. If I was to come in here and say we did 100 FPNs,
It's not right.
it sounds wonderful because we've made lots of money and we've done all sorts of different, and I've shown lots of bits of paper, but it doesn't stop the activity. All it
But
does
also
is
we
you
weren't
keep
looking
on
at that, were we?
dealing with it in an enforcement way. What we want to do is shift it to much more prevention and actually working with people and changing those behaviours.
Because we were going to have a stepped approach as well, is it's not just straight away with young people giving them an FPN.
Yeah.
Fine, the whole point was they would come to David and actually we might write to the parents a letter to say they've been breaching. So before any FPN was actually issued, there'd be a stepped approach towards any child, anybody under 16. Because again, we were very mindful that we don't, you know, it's slightly different with, say, the barbecues and things because they were adults on the French ones, but we didn't want to just blanketly give young people FPN. So there was a stepped approach anyhow, but it never got as implemented as, we never used it in that way. I think we should be trying to use it more than how it was, but it is prevention, isn't it?
But if you didn't have it there, you'd be using more criminal
Yeah.
activity, more powers as well. And you know, Rob said earlier on, you know, they will use them where they need to. But again, it's about trying to say something.
So
This isn't the way to do it.
Yeah.
Let's
So can we
move
move
on.
to the recommendation? I'm sure the committee, what I'm feeling, is agreed that we should
Absolutely.
extend this. And we also should work with David if we feel there is a potential problem in our area, because I think many of us do. But as you say, it's about the scale of it and whether or not what is the correct remedy for that particular antisocial behaviour. But thank you, David. That was very clear.
Chair, before you go off that, David, is there any way that you could report back to us of what the police are doing in our own areas around Waverley? Because some of us don't often see the police around at all, or what activity they're doing in our areas.
I think we could do that with the council awareness for Safeway Partnership, and I think it'd be good to have Inspector O'Brien put what his policing is across the borough, because he did that with he was informing us the other day, and it's quite interesting, their policing resource. So I think it would be good for them to come and present that, and then you can ask those questions directly around how are they in themselves as a police force, and then how they're working with partnership. So I think we used to do that. That was sort of what we.
I'm not sure in all those recommendations, we actually put in the one about you doing a presentation day. We talked about training.
Yeah,
so perhaps if we should put that recommendation in, that there will be a day, and at that day we will have.
We'll have a two-pronged approach, so we can.
That would be really
and it's
good.
really, again, it's you can't. We're not unable to hold them to account, but you can at least ask questions, and they can, sort of say what their policing structure is, because it is quite surprising, isn't it? The resource at the moment, it's.
Well, thank you again, Katie and David and
Thank
Sam.
you very much. And may I say thank you for allowing my son to observe.
It's been very well behaved.
Wasn't sure whether to give a round of applause.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much.
So if we could go back briefly to the corporate management, corporate performance report, and do this as ever. I think I get so confused with these numbers, you know, I think it's about page 35 of the actual report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start.
Yeah.
Am I right, am I wrong?
You're right.
So again, if we can do it by default rather than, talking about everything. Anything in the first bit, remember we don't deal with the money, sorry. We deal with the service, it's not with the resources of it. So probably not a lot to say on the regeneration plan and policy at this stage, but do feel free to chip in. Commercial services, we haven't got Kelvin with us. Was there anything that you wanted to raise on commercial services? Leisure, building control, parking? Just got one thing about parking that I would raise with an officer if an officer were here, so I'll ask him or Jake if they could do that. How do we just monitor the sort of street furniture, if you like, in the car parks? Because I've been working with residents who've been complaining to me, and we've had some success. But when you walk into a car park, you notice if all the barriers around the baskets, for example, are falling to bits. I mean, you can see it. It doesn't take a genius. Now, presumably, somebody goes around with issuing tickets. Is there not a way where they can just tick a box and say, have a look at car park? Because the issues that one was a sort of danger, if you like, that basically it was a loose, and they're quite big, these bits of piping, that are going around. The other one was more damage to cars because the trolleys could get out because there was a bar missing. You know what I'm talking about, these sort of barriers. Yeah. Now, how does that get looked at on a regular basis? Who does it? Or do you just rely on people? Because, when I go to, as I say, I notice it, residents notice it, they tell me, I notice it again, but it's something to me that should never really get beyond, somebody who's in the car park doing a job. Could just easily pick up the phone or whatever. So that's the only thing apart from anything else, it looks a mess.
Well, if we take it away and talk to Kelvin, what I'd expect is that there is regular, having managed car parks, my previous authority, regular inspections, and if nothing else, in part for our own insurance. Because if someone trips or falls, then we're liable. Yeah. So I am absolutely sure Kelvin will come back and say there is regular inspections, probably by our own engineers team, or they might use the parking attendants with devices to do.
I would imagine.
I don't know the answer. We can take it away.
If you would. The grounds maintenance team, they're doing the verges and things like that.
There will be someone, because if nothing else, we have to do it for our own insurance.
And it's a bit like painting a line around a pothole instead of actually filling it in. It drives me mad. Because, basically, I know, but it's the same principle that there's two issues in one car park. One is the fact that the trolleys are coming out and hitting the cars. The other one is the fact that it's a danger to people walking past. So they come out and mend the danger, which is fair because that's a bigger danger. While you're there, could you not have done the other one? I mean, there seems to be such a lack of logic sometimes to these, what I call simple repairs. I mean, if you're there with brackets and whatever to do one bit of railing, surely you could do another. But anyway, I'll let you pass that on. Yeah, Councillor Murray.
Yes, just 2 points. There's one particular car park in Farnham. It's the basement one, which is by Sainsbury's.
Oh yeah.
And it's awful. I use it quite regularly.
South Street one.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it's smelly, very smelly. It's dilapidated. And all the rest of it. I'm sure it's on a list, but could it be?
South Street's being done up, yeah.
Could it be higher? Yeah. And the other one is the general one. We put up parking charges, as you know, I voted for it. So don't object to it. Have we had any complaints? Serious number of complaints? It hasn't actually come into effect yet, of course, it's been widely publicised.
I'm not aware of that yet. Again, I can feed that back. Now we have complaints officers who might, unless I don't know if Jenny has heard anything about that on the performance grapevine. But
sorry, Jenny, I didn't see you there.
That's okay, Chair. I'm not aware of any complaints because they would have come through on the commercial services dashboard as complaints, and commercial services haven't had complaints for some time. So surprisingly, I'm not aware of any complaints about car parks.
Jenny, I'm so sorry because you disappeared. We just had the table of us and nobody else for a while. Is there something you would like to say ahead of us going through them area by area?
Nothing in particular. It was just to highlight the areas of concern which you did yourself. So that's great.
Thank you. We let Sam get away. So for the community services grants, but I think she's probably done enough and told us about partnership working. So we'll let her off for that. Anyone got anything on care that they particularly want to flag up?
Right.
Environmental services, that's on page 48. I'll come on box here. I was just going to say we've actually got the officer here. So let's tear this report apart. Mark, would you like to highlight anything that you think you should be looking at or be concerned about?
Yes, I mean, there's quite a sea of reds, aren't there, on the beginning there, 32 on the table. And one is on the material recovery facilities. I've got a slide on that later, so let's leave it that, shall we? Yeah. And the other bit is mainly around missed bins. So you can see the performance has improved significantly in terms of bins missed by 100,000 collected. Although, of course, if you're the household with bins missed, it's a red flag. And 40 is quite a challenging target, to be honest with you. You know, nationally, if you're under 70, you're doing fine, but nonetheless, 40 is there as a target. So what Daniel Pamphlet's working on now, which many of you will know, is our waste contracts manager. There's a performance mechanism in the contract with BIFA, which has been turned off since COVID, but he's working on now and basically turning that back on. Now that we've got the in-cab technology in all the collection, there's a much better, reactive system we can use the technology to its most to try and get that level further down from 50 odd to 40 odd. So if he manages that, you've done very well.
Because I wrote to you, you were just a name at that point. You just arrived.
Yes.
Yeah. And
sorry, yes,
I
I
wrote
do
you.
have to respond.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote to you about food waste bins because I have such a thing about this. Partly because I have just driven past my daughter and her neighbours and her other neighbour bins that have been out for days, weeks, and we've flagged it up, they flagged it. We've all flagged up the fact that we keep missing these three houses, their bins. And what happens eventually, if they don't come, they put the food waste in the grey bin.
Yes, that's right.
And what I flagged up to you was not my daughter's problem, she can do that herself, but was just generally the fact that the men throw the bins. Now, it might seem a very small point, but they toss them to one side, and every time you put your bin up that you carefully put out overnight, there's another bit missing or a bit dropping off or the hole's got a bit bigger, And people do get to the stage where they think, well, why should I go to all this trouble? I'll just shove it all in the grey bin. And you, later on in your presentation, are going to tell us that that's one thing you want to stop us doing.
Correct.
So, we have got to do something about food waste to make it an attractive way, for people to leave it out. Otherwise, they will put it in the grey bin.
I'll put my two pennyworth things
Yeah.
because that's in Cranley. Cranley, I can't get my bin neat enough because I always put it back in with the handle actually upright and the lid sealed. So whether it's just a crew thing or not, I don't know. So I've never had that problem.
It must be the Farnham crew.
Because they throw them.
Because they throw, yes, I raised that with Daniel Pamphlet as well.
Never
He
seen it.
did say to raise it with him directly and he will sort of get a conversation going with the specific crew that.
Yeah.
Feedback is the key, absolutely. So it's great to hear that, actually best practice
Works
can be done.
incredibly.
All the vehicles now have 360-degree cameras. So if we know where the complaint is, we could look and we can see which crew member it is and we can deal with it.
Lovely. Councillor Monroe, yeah.
I have made this point before, but I think these performance indicators, the sea of red on page 50 is crackers. We're just setting ourselves up to fail. it's nonsense. I mean, 80 complaints out of 100,000. And it's red. Can we get some realistic one? I have to say, a year ago, I did get a steady stream of complaints from people in my ward, and they're all fixed. But I haven't had any complaints at all for several months. I don't know whether that's a general feeling.
So I mean, performance has definitely improved over the last quarter or two, without any question. In terms of the targets, I'm not quite sure, but usually they're set in April, so we may be rewarded into that process, or maybe we're about to set them. I'm not certain, but I imagine it'd be up to members usually to set those with obviously response to guidance. Absolutely, and maybe we should just change the threshold slightly for red, amber, and green, and keep with 40 as a target. You know, I'm sure we could work with that.
But as she was saying, the numbers are really irrelevant in the sense that, you know, if it's the same 3 bins every fortnight, I mean, you know, you're not actually, you know, the numbers don't really make a great deal of sense.
Absolutely.
You know,
Jenny's got a hand.
oh, Jenny, sorry.
No, that's right. We will be doing a KPI review shortly. We just have been slightly delayed. We normally do it sort of in January, February, March time. We've just been slightly delayed by focusing on the corporate strategy at the moment. But it might be worth putting forward a recommendation for that, because if you look just under E3A and E3B, I have put in the achievement percentages for that exact reason, to highlight the success of how well we're actually doing. That's collecting 99.95 on time is a fantastic achievement, rather than focusing on the 50 missed bins. But it might be worth putting forward a recommendation, if that's what you would like to do, for the KPI, because we will be doing the KPI review shortly.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea, Jenny. Has the committee agreed on that one?
And so much more important is not the fact that they are reported initially, but actually the problem is solved.
Yes.
Which to my personal experience, it always has been.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to wait a day or two when the bins are outside before they're collected. But I've never had a serial complainer say my bin's been out there for 2 weeks and nothing has happened. Perhaps
you know my daughter. Give her a ring.
Perhaps I should speak to Gail. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that recommendation is good. Has anybody else got anything they want to say on bins? It's always been some planning, isn't it? That sort of get us going. So we're moving on to planning on page 52. Yeah.
I'm going backwards to why was the question. I was just wondering, the legal and democratic services. Is that right? We've not got any page 30.
Yeah, that
goes to the other one.
That goes to resources.
Yeah.
We only, if you look at page.
Right, okay.
I'll make it 35.
Legal and democratic services is entirely under the remit of the other
Under resources.
committee. There's some that split slightly, but that was
It's
entirely
just the
under the remit of
regeneration.
Yeah.
If you look at page 65, councillor Austin,
Yeah.
you'll see that it shows which services are under which.
Make the whole thing, which there we go. Enjoy that.
It's never been the easiest thing to
Thanks. Gotcha.
So move on to page 52 then, planning. We've got Claire here. Good news in some ways, isn't it? You know, performance definitely better in terms of speed. I think you know. Well, Claire, you speak for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously got one red, and whilst it looks, it's obviously a red, but actually the reality of this is that we are beginning to really make positive inroads into the backlog that we had. So I think when I arrived a year ago, we had 800 applications on hand. We've now got 500 applications on hand, and we're getting rid of all those 2022/23 applications. But sort of as a result of that first P1 figure means that we have got a percentage that we're determining that are over 26 weeks old, and hence the red But the reality is that we have to deal with this and get on top of the work that's still in the system.
And I think, you know, the issue for most of us is that we know that, you know, staffing is a really
Yeah.
difficult issue. And obviously it's good that we're improving our times and everything else, but we've also got to have our quality. And it's not that the agency staff aren't fully qualified, they are, but they're not here long enough to really, well, some of them
Yeah,
are.
so on staffing, you know, even though we are running on, I think we've got 14 agency staff at the moment, the people that we've got in are working together really, really well. We're starting to have some really good professional discussions.
Total size of the team, sorry, 14 out of what?
It's 20 out of 20, but some of them are part-time, so it's not quite as bad as it sounds. Because so we're out to advert at the moment, we've got really running for sort of all 4 roles, but obviously we've got multiple roles under each job title. And that advert will finish on the 4th of April, with a view to doing interviews in the week beginning the 15th and 20, whatever it is, I can't add that now, it's the 22nd of April.
Because I would like to support, you know, your recruitment. I mean, I think as part of the recommendation, I mean, I think we should welcome the improvement because it is there and we're very grateful because nobody wants a planning service that is not functioning properly. But interestingly, today we got the thing from PAS about initiatives to get more people into planning, government initiatives, local initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got not only to recruit, but we've got to retain, and that also is a skill. So I would like to welcome the improvement in the planning delivery, but also to recommend to the executive again that you know you are adequately resourced, not only to recruit, but also to look at innovative ways of getting staff and then of ways of retaining them. Because if we don't do that, I mean, we're just going to go round in circles, aren't we?
Yeah, agreed. So
I think Councillor Austin was first, then Councillor Monroe.
Sorry, it was just on these numbers. If you know, perfect world, how many people are employed in fully staffed planning team?
at the moment, the establishment, I'm pretty certain it is 20.
So you should have
established.
20 people
20
full-time.
qualified planners in planning officer roles.
So you don't have any vacancy then, I suppose that's what I'm asking. You're not under
We've got
resourced. It's just that they're agency.
their agency, yeah. We probably have still got some vacancy because there's a transition moving to staff. I could give you the exact numbers, but not off the top of my
That
head.
helps. No, that helps. Thank you.
The trouble is, if you give us numbers and charts, the following debate it's moving. I feel so
We
sorry.
have managed to retain all our contractors who seem to be very happy at the moment.
Oh, I thought one of my favourite ones had gone. Well, there you go. Right, Councillor Monroe, then Councillor Busby.
Just like to say, it's only anecdotal, but I'm getting a much better response now when I ring up about particularly contentious applications. I get an answer, and people are actually starting to contact me before I contact them to tell me the progress. I'm sure there's more to go, but from my point of view, it's much better than it was 6 to 9 months ago when I was, like probably everybody else, I was always having to badge them. Yeah.
That's really good
credit
feedback.
where credit is due. From my perspective, other people may have a contrary experience, of course.
Councillor Austin? You've been ahead of Councillor Busby.
I'd agree, David, actually, yeah. In terms of the most recent recruitment campaign or the current recruitment campaign, I know the ad's still running, but since the news that we're not going to be designated, any indication as to whether that news or other factors have meant there's been more interest in the role or the roles?
I don't know the answer for certain, but the experience we've had at Guildford, because we've just completed a recruitment campaign there, is that we had applicants for roles.
Yes, good.
Which is a good starting point. We managed to recruit 2 of the contractors that we had there that have been working there for quite a period of time, and they chose to take a full-time role, which is really, really positive because they start the next day, they've got the caseload, they know the area, they know the policies, and so that's really good. So, you know, I couldn't say for sure it's because we weren't designated, but certainly what's happened at Guildford has been quite positive.
It's got to be an easier sell, you would have thought. Come and join us because we're performing well now.
Right, has anybody got anything else burning? Or can we move on to Mark's presentation?
Just a
Yes,
question,
yeah.
if that's okay, on these, I've got a couple of 22, 21 applications. Have specifically Way and Hour Canal, for example, how
Right.
we, you know, what's the timescale really for getting rid of the end of those?
Yeah, so possibly I'll pick that one
Right, one of
outside.
them.
So we are really, I've got a number of measures to put in place, which includes some sort of work with other parts of the council as well, the legal team, between us, but more on top of what's in there, moving 106s. In fact, even this evening before I came in here, I signed off 3 ceiling things.
Okay.
So I'll come back to you on that, those specific ones. to give
Just
you the
generally,
timelines.
really though, you know, how many we're talking about now that have we got left?
There's really barely any. So the last lot, I think, the canal ones have just gone to Simon.
There's a new guy.
Dunlewitt,
Yeah.
who's just started, so he's well and truly get his teeth into those backlogs. And again, he's a really experienced planner, you know, 35 years experience under his belt. Very focused on getting the right outcome, not just about processing planning applications, which I personally have a real difficulty with, because what we're doing is shaping communities. But so yeah, I can't give you the exact time. We are really on.
Right, Graham, I see your hand up. I do really want to move on and
Sorry.
get Mark to do his presentation.
Sorry.
But is it a burning issue? You're on mute. You're on mute.
You're muted, councillor. Councillor,
You're
we can't,
muted,
we
Councillor
can't,
White.
we can't hear you.
Sorry, I clicked it and it hasn't got in. I believe, Carol, I believe I had a responsibility to read George Hess's question.
Yes, no, we did. We dealt with that in your absence.
You did an awful lot in 15 minutes.
I know. When we get going, this committee is.
I'm
it's
very
just
impressed, Carol.
dynamite. But thank
Yeah.
you for the offer.
I'm very impressed. I do have a couple of small questions for Claire, but if we've run out of time, I will direct those myself later. That's fine.
If you could, Councillor White, that would be very helpful. I think.
I will. No problem. No problem.
I think we should move on unless, yeah, Jenny, you're quite happy. Nothing else you want to add?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Can I-
Right, so move on.
Can I just double check, with mentions of recommendation, was there one around potentially investigating means of recruitment and retention in?
Well, it's really resourcing adequately so that we can be creative in our means of recruitment and retention.
Okay.
So that we're looking at everything that's available that will help the borough to, help Claire to, you know, run an efficient one. So that was really the thrust.
Okay.
of
Is
the
everyone
recommendation.
happy with that?
I'm sure we are. We all. We all want the borough to succeed.
Did you also want to make one about potentially the KPI review that was mentioned? Is
yes.
that happening anyway? Yeah. Okay,
Yes, we
so
want
so
to
just
recommend that as well.
to support that, okay.
Yeah,
wonderful,
yeah,
thank
certainly
you.
do, yeah.
Thank you. that's
Right,
great.
Mark, your big moment has come.
I'll hopefully share my screen.
This came to this committee as a result of something that Councillor Monroe said. Yeah, you mentioned the Surrey. Waste partnership. Waste partnership,
right.
yeah, they, not called that.
So I'm keeping you from your supper and other things. Sorry about that.
No, it's most interesting, and I think it's something we should be looking at. There's nothing in your papers on this.
No, it's easy.
Okay.
Sorry.
I know.
Can you not read that?
Yeah.
I'm ready to share my screen. I got my PowerPoint open.
Right, yeah.
Because they're overwhelmed.
Really giving me
Window.
Not giving me
We said
much.
all this at the beginning of the house.
Didn't it?
Can we, could we reread? Just seems crazy.
So just for the committee, there's nothing in your slide, but there will be eventually a slide
It was
presentation.
because you
And
didn't
those
have
slides
the
will be sent.
actual window open.
Right, there we go. Sorry, environment.
Glad you're here.
See, I told you, if I go, you
Yeah, absolutely. So apologies.
the technical goes.
Apologies, I should have just introduced myself first before I got so excited being asked a question. So I'm Mark Allen, so I'm the interim head of environmental services. I hope my permanent replacement should arrive about mid-June. That's why I'm here for now. So yeah, thank you very much for asking me to come and talk about the Surrey Environment Partnership and Waverley Council. So the way I'm just going to approach this is just to first of all talk about Waverley in the way that's collected here and sort of a needs analysis, where we are and therefore what we need, and then about the Surrey Environment Partnership and what it offers and what it's delivered and what it can deliver. So here's kind of the big picture, the Waverley, the waste that we collect in Waverley. As you can see, dry mixed recycling, food waste and garden waste, performing well, good figures up in the 60s. Residual waste 42%. And of course, one of the key things we need to do and want to do is to reduce that amount of residual waste. The garden waste service is a big part of that, and this graph just shows, it's a popular, well-used service. So the line at the bottom there is the number of subscribers, number of households, if you like, and the line above is the number of bins. So you can see, many people actually do have more than one bin. Dry mixed recycling. So this is the bit we're going to get onto in a minute about the contamination. So this is the makeup of all that dry mixed recycling that you put into the recycling bin. So as you can see, the mixed glass 28%, and mixed paper 23%, and cardboard 16%, and news and magazines 10% make up the vast majority of that mix. Pots, tubs, and trays just under 5%. And then PET, so we then start to get into the plastics, clear PET, steel cans 2%, HDPE, it's another type of plastic, natural, aluminium cans 1.3%, HDPE coloured and PET coloured 0.5% and 0.2%. So all those there are what we call acceptable. So that's what we're targeting, that's what the marketing is on, that's what's on the website. These are the materials that we want people to put into their recycling bin. Now, the next list, which you won't find on our website, is what we call the objectionable list. So we don't want these materials. However, the material recovery facility that sorts them can cope with them. Okay, so plastic bags, just over 1%. Scrap metal. So this is not food containers now. This is really metal that you should be taking to the community recycling centre rather than food and drink containers. Hard plastics. So again, that's things like not a margarine tub, but I don't know, a child's slide from the garden, that kind of hard plastic. Again, bulky, that can be to take it to the community recycling centre, which is the 3 in Waverley. And plastic film gets 0 on this particular scale. But nonetheless, although they're quite small numbers, there's your first 2% of contamination that we don't really want, but can handle. Now, the red list is the contamination which we don't want and the material recovery city cannot cope with. And again, all these individual numbers are quite small, but you will see that, so food at 1.4% is up the top. And of course, one of the problems with food is it does contaminate other materials like paper, card, it will make a mess and it won't be good. Textiles, all kinds of problems with textiles when you take it through a mechanical sorting facility, because you could imagine they unwound and they get stuck in the machinery, all bad news. Tetra Pak and foil containers, we really call these liquid food cartons, but Tetra Pak is the most common name, like a Hoover. These can be recycled actually, but it does depend on your facility. So they are a multi-part material. They're a layer of card, a layer of plastic, and typically a layer of aluminium foil. But in our case, where our materials go, the MRF can't handle it and doesn't want them. Black waste sacks, a lot of people still wrap up their recycling, put it into a bag still, which is not helpful because we need to sort the individual parts. Wet paper, again, the problem with wet paper doesn't work well. Wood, sanitary nappies, 0.3%. Other types of hazardous waste, green waste, ceramics and Pyrex. So these are very bad news for glass recycling because obviously glass, when it's recycled, is all melted at high temperature. Of course, Pyrex doesn't melt, and so that's a significant problem in processing. Expanded polystyrene, well, anyone who's had to handle this knows what a nightmare that is. So that breaks up its, terrible material. Sand and building materials, who would have thought? There you go. Plastic laminates and wax paper, again, it's got a multi-material objects. And oil and pesticides also appear, although not for Waverley. So I think, although none of those numbers are huge, although food is the biggest, that's another 5.6%. So on the earlier performance report, you will see it about 7%. Now, actually, although that's not ideal, I'm told by the Surrey Environment Partnership actually Waverley is the best performer on this in the county. And nationally, if you're under 10, again, that's okay. If you're over 10, 15, that's not so good. But it's a significant thing. That's something we do need to work on. So then if we think about look at residual waste, so in 2021, the SEP sampled across all Surrey authorities, and that's including Waverley, to see what's actually in the residual waste. So this graph shows that. So on the left there, you can see that food waste is by far the biggest single material, and the brown bar shows what proportion of that food waste, is recyclable, is compostable. There's various other miscellaneous things, and then plastics, of which probably about a third is it on there, are recyclable, and then paper and card, and so on down the list. But you can see here very clearly, easily the biggest item in the residual waste that we need to get out is the food waste. And just as we were discussing earlier, you're absolutely right. I think we haven't got massively good data nationwide on this, but it's clearly most councils now, but not all, offer a weekly food waste collection, and many, but not all, offer a weekly alternate rubbish recycling. So very similar to the model in Surrey. But I think there is complex behaviour. I think just like you said earlier, sometimes households may put food waste into the residual bin, not use their food waste bin every week. So there's all kinds of things going on. But this is the key thing in the rubbish that we need to get out is food waste.
When you say food, is this cooked food? Is this raw food? What sort of food?
Any food is fine.
Any food. Yeah. I mean, because there's a number of people that don't have these little food caddies. So I suspect that they think I've got a garden waste. I'll chuck it in there.
Yeah, that would be bad news. Really, we don't really want to have food waste in the garden. It's kind of acceptable in residual waste because it always has been there. But garden, if you start to put food waste, vegetables aren't the end of the world, but any animal byproducts, is there any meat or similar, then you're into legislative compliance problems. Yeah, absolutely. But no, so if someone hasn't got a caddy, then obviously you need to encourage them to get one and to start using it. And so yes, on the food waste, there's information that we probably do need more of about participation and set out rates. So this is about who has got caddies and who hasn't. So we do know there are quite a few flats which we aren't able to offer the service for at the moment, but actually we will need to. So the law, as you probably know, is going to change with a simpler recycling agenda that every household will have to have a food waste collection service offered to them. So one of the things that Dan Pamphlet's working on is getting that data together just to certainly know which properties those are, so that we can then start to deliver bins and start to get them into the service. I mean, the reason they won't have been, I imagine, beginning because they are the harder to service properties. So there isn't so much storage space, maybe there's no communal area, things of that nature. So you often have to come up with a bespoke solution to make it work. It takes more work. And the set-out rates, this is really about how many people actually do put a brown bin out, a caddy out rather for food waste. And again, we haven't got hard data on this, but it'd be good to know because then we can target the right households. But again, typically, you're talking about 50%, only about half of households. If you look down the street, you probably see that's generally speaking about the right. But this is the sort of data that we need to get so that we can start to target. So in terms of kind of what we need, you know, we also need to reduce residual. We definitely need to reduce contamination, recycling, although we are a good performing site, still more we could do. And we absolutely need to increase food waste participation. So that's kind of, you know, what we need. And then we look at the Surrey Environment Partnership. A nice little heading isn't visible there. Oh well, so this is the offer, and I'm going to guess what the date was for this. So I think this is what they, the work programme they offered in last year, this year just ending, 23-24. So this long list here is offered to all the councils in Surrey. I won't read them all out, but it's quite comprehensive. And one thing we all get, no matter what, is this list, service guide, the communication campaign. You're probably aware there's an app for Surrey. There's obviously the website. Rethink Waste and Educational Resources, which I'll come on to in a bit. There's an annual report they produce. They do a lot of work because there's been consultations with government recently, so they've done a lot of collective work on responding to consultations and engaging with DEFRA to help influence that. They manage all the numbers, so the statutory system for waste data flow, it's called, where we have to all put in all our numbers, all the tonnages, all the time, every quarter, so the government's got the big picture and household waste. And of course, they've got that manage the money and have the governments for the partnership. However, when we look at what we Waverley have individually, if you like, as a council, rather than as a collective partnership actually had, we haven't really had so much over the last couple of years. This is the last time that the partnership actually did specific work in Waverley. So that's 2021, where they did some work on contamination flats, and they did some work on commons methodology as well with flats. And so since then, we haven't actually used their specialist expertise to help us in Waverley. We've had the general stuff, but not specific. Now this is the programme, as I said, I apologise for the heading, it's not showing for some reason, but this is what they're saying they're going to focus on in next year. So the one just about to start in April. And again, absolutely on messages, these are the core things that we need. Focusing on food waste, increasing participation on that, and working to reduce contamination in your dry mixed recycling. So this is the list of all the things that they can do, which we should be interested in. And this is the kind of bit where I like your feedback, and I'll use this slide again in a minute at the end to say what things you think would be useful for us to say, actually, we'd like to get a slot in your work programme. And just to mention schools, so we have got 2 schools signed up out of a total of 30 in the county. So there is a bit more room if you've got good links with the school and you think they ought to be involved in the Rethink Waste and the stuff with the children, the educational resources. But the school obviously has to want to do it, can't we? And this is their comms plan for next year, their engagement plan. So we'll get all these things. We'll be going through the county, which way will be a part. So overall, our needs and what they offer, I think, align very well. But I think the missing thing is us engaging on some specifics that we would like to see in Waverley, using some of their expertise. And so I very much welcome your view on this list, which I've just shown you very briefly, as to what you think, would work well in Waverley or you would like to see. So Rethink Waste, I don't know if you know what that is, but you can basically, it's kind of an incentive scheme you kind of sign up for on the web. And then there's information on the web, but then you kind of get targeted messages to say, perhaps this week you can try this, we can try that. There's prizes and that kind of thing. No food waste.
You've got a lot of time, isn't it?
You have to be.
No children, no job. We probably just about to sign up for it, but
Absolutely. But it has planned to be very effective when they've done the backup so the people who do use it, they've found people have been very positive about it. So it's the right thing for you. It's the right thing. No food waste stickers on postcards, so we can, if we've got good data, we can start to target areas where we think they're particularly poorly performing. There's the county-wide comms I mentioned, and they do their resident research. But again, if we think there's something particular we'd like to know, we can ask. Can't guarantee, but we can ask. They're producing the service guides again this year, but just to note, there's no calendars this year. If we want a calendar, it's on a paper, a card calendar, we're going to have to pay for that and get in early as well. There's the data system they run, again, which we obviously can analyse if we want something. The app, they're their digital channels. No food waste stickers on new residual bins. So that might be useful for, targeting new build estates when they come online and we deliver the bins. We mentioned one earlier. And they produce their recycling survey report. So I mentioned, which is kind of like an annual report, but the best description for that, which you may have seen. And they've also got this idea of using contamination letters from a MRF worker, so a material recovery facility worker. So the idea is that kind of a human contact to talk about contamination, like that table's a bit dry, if you like. But the idea is if you've got an area or maybe a house, which has got a serious contamination problems in and around, they send a letter from the person saying, look, I have to sort out your recycling and it's full of, this and, so you kind of engage more on a human level to try and tackle that contamination issue. And finally, there's I have to update the joint waste municipal strategy. So that's the long list. Very much welcome members' feedback.
Start, Councillor Austin.
I can start. I didn't know until a couple of years ago, when you're putting jars and bits and bobs, you have to rinse everything out, otherwise it's contaminated. I know there's a lot of people who still don't know that. How do we educate people about that? Because I do that now, I make sure that I do it. And I think that's a really big issue, to get rid of this food contamination problem.
Well, so that would be one way, would be to use, let's say, the letter from the MRF worker saying, I know you want to recycle this glass jar, but.
I think if people knew that to do it, then they are conscientious and they would do it.
Except that we are in a water sensitive area and there's some people who tell you we should.
Now.
But Councillor Long.
So I had they're not questions from your list, but can we do anything about Tetra Paks? Because more and more products are sold in Tetra Paks now. I think there's a perception that it's cardboard, and I know a lot of people put it into their recycling. There's a perception that it's better than plastic, and that maybe people buy products because they're in Tetra Pak because they think they're more recyclable. But it's really hard to recycle, isn't it? I know of one collection place in Waverley, but I did try for a long time to collect up my Tetra Paks and take them there, but I've kind of lapsed.
Yeah.
Can we do anything?
So we can. There's two things. So you can take them to the county council community recycling centres. They do accept them there as recyclable. So they go through a different process than the ones that we picked up as objectionable in our waste stream. The only other thing we can do is, of course, is to ultimately be up for the county council to have a different contract with a different MRF that can accept them. So I know that the county council are moving towards getting a planning permission to build their own MRF for Surrey. So that would be an opportunity for us to say, actually, and I'm sure they're already well aware of it, this is the kind of material that we would like a new MRF to accept.
Because I'm very childish, I do like a sticker. I'm sorry, I don't mean a well done, Councillor Coburn sticker. But if I see something on my bin, and we've had various ones over the years, as long as it doesn't boss me, as long as it encourages me, and preferably makes me smile, I'll do it. So, I think something like Councillor Austin has just said with rinsing, it's very simple to do a diagram of, what you mustn't do, what you must do, stick it under the tap. So I'm a great believer in sort of informal stickers. Obviously, nobody else is feeling that. We'll go to you first, Councillor, then back to Councillor Long.
I must be very sad because I notice driving around the streets that I do when it's bin day, that some people don't have a blue bin even. All they seem to ever have is a black bin or a grey bin, and they don't have a food waste. So even if there was possibly a bit of energy that went round and provided people with the different coloured bins so they can use them, I accept we have to pay for carbon waste, but the blue bins and the food caddies, it's rare.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Long.
So again, picking up on Councillor Austin's question about rinsing things, I've heard horror stories about what a problem the contamination is and how much of the waste it contaminates. I'd love to know whether those horror stories are true. So how much of a problem is what does that bit of contamination do? How widely is it spread in the facility?
Well, so it varies, but the sort of things that can happen are, well, I mentioned Pyrex, so that's a significant safety risk, you know, and what will happen is that the way you have to think about recycling, it's not so much about putting it into your bin. You've got to think that somewhere there's a factory someplace that wants that material as a raw material going into their process to make something useful that they can sell. You know, so it's an important product to them. And so they will want to maintain the quality of that input material into their factory. So they will do quality tests basically. And so if they find the wrong material in what they thought was, you know, they thought it was all glass in this Pyrex, for example, they will reject the entire load. That's typically what they do. So they won't just say, oh, we'll take that bit out. They say, no, if that's in there, the whole load goes. So that could be, you know, 40 tons and that's gone. So it's that kind of thing. I mentioned about food and paper. It's a similar sort of thing. It just makes a mess in the process and reduces the quality of the paper. So again, maybe then you can't take it to a higher quality paper mill. It'll have to go to a lower one. So then you lose money and so. So I wouldn't say that there are very few horror stories. I mean, hazardous waste and gas bottles are another safety issue, that kind of thing. So there's plenty of. So if I were to pick a horror story, it probably would be batteries. Actually, so there's a fire on a waste site in this country every single day. Gosh, every single day. It's now become a significant issue. You'll see it in the news more than ever used to.
And yet there's never been more points where you can drop batteries off, you know, if people just use them. Councillor Monroe?
The residual waste, where does that go to?
So it goes, gets transferred to Sligo Waste Transfer Station, and it goes to the Eco Park for the gasification there. That's I can't remember the name of the facility in Surrey now. Run by Suez, name escapes me. So it essentially gets burned.
Not at Newlands Corner there, is it?
It's all,
Is it Newlands Corner?
Doesn't ring a bell.
No,
It's
the
coming
one
to
that
me.
was built.
Eco Park something. Yes.
Yeah, I know
It's
what
all
you
next to the motorway.
So does anything go into landfill?
Very little goes into landfill now in household waste. I haven't got the exact figure for Surrey. Very little does. And now most waste goes to incineration because some things won't burn. Asbestos is probably a good example.
Yeah,
So any kind of waste like that. The vast majority now of household waste is incinerated.
So I don't feel that too guilty then if I put stuff into the residual waste.
No, I suppose it's better than any other thing that you could do with it. You sort of mean other than not having. So can we sort of tie this up? Because basically, if we take Councillor Townsend's point, far too many people are not even involved in recycling, reducing, you know. So we've got to do an education campaign again, because I remember doing this way back, you know. So an education campaign as cheaply as we can do it to get people. And I still don't think you tell people what to do, because I think it just puts their backs up. You cajole or you explain why. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? So succinctly, but explain why. Councillor Busby?
Yeah, just on that, Chair, do we have a clear understanding as to why people don't use their food waste caddy? Because a lot of the measures, they're excellent, but it's encouraging rather than telling, which is good, but something to actually solve the problem as to why they're not doing it. I guess it's because they don't want food waste in their home for all that long, and they'd rather just take it outside. But
I'm sure
there's a solution around that.
What I'll do is actually maybe I should ask the Surrey Environment Partnership for their latest bit of research on that, because I'm sure they will have something, and then I could circulate that.
That could be useful, but I seem to remember it maybe in September, I think maybe a predecessor, was it when Chris Wheeler was with us in Environmental Services, some questions have been asked about this, about the efficacy of certain different kinds of messaging, and I asked him to look into it. So I don't know if anything, he left anything from around September, October, like we're looking at.
Well, I mean, the SEP, this is their area of expertise. So I'll certainly get the answer to the question of food waste.
So should we sort of, I mean, we're fully recommending that, you know, we work on the 3 items that you had, you know.
I mean, when it comes down to it, recycling is the third best option after minimisation, not having it in the first place, and reuse. So should we ask SEP to, let's have a campaign on those first two. Don't recycle. Don't have it in the first place. And it's a more difficult message to get over.
It is, although I think the reuse message is getting across. I mean, people are sort of sharing things and passing things on rather than and vintage clothes and all of this sort of thing. I think people are sort of getting the idea. But I mean, if it is sort of 50% of our population not engaged in either recycling, reusing, or sort of sorting basically their waste, then we ought to be doing something about it. But using, yes, I mean, the SCP resources and ours where we can to do that.
But when you think 20 years ago, how far we have come, I do think collectively, residents, we deserve a pat on the back.
Well, we do, and people always said, "Oh, people won't do that; they'll show it all in," and people do. Yeah. But if you remember at the beginning, we had different containers, and the first container was a disaster because if you put all your stuff in it, you couldn't lift the wretched thing. We've learned on the job, as it were, and the wheel bin sort of work, but. I mean, I think as a borough, we fully want to do this. Don't we? We want the maximum amount or the least harm, if you like, to the environment as a result of our lifestyle and our rubbish collection. So anything we can do to, support your aim, we will do so. So our recommendation basically is that we fully support.
I see we have Councillor White actually might want to jump in.
Councillor White.
Yeah.
Hurry up, we've got something to do.
I was going to comment earlier. The question for Mark, with the food waste bins, if you put, I think one of the problems there is that, people don't like the little caddies necessarily in the house. It all gets a bit messy, it gets knocked over. And I know from our point of view, we always take the food waste out and put it into the external bin, if you like, the caddy bin. It's two bins, isn't there? Yeah. There's the large. How do you differentiate between the two? Is one the one is the caddy and the
curbside kitchen caddy and food waste bin is what we tend to
food waste bin, right? So what is the situation with a compostable or disposable bag? If you put that food in the disposable bag and put it into the food waste bin, does that make that of no use whatsoever, or?
No, so combustible liner. The combustible liner is perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
Combustible. Oh, right. Okay. So I know a lot of people do that. I mean, that might be a way of a suggestion. It might be a way of promoting the service. I think more people might use it if they were using, a bag that they could drop straight into the waste bin rather than the caddy, because it all gets a bit messy and sloppy and without going into too much detail. So, that might be a way of promoting things.
Yeah, so GRAP, as you may know, the Waste Resource Action Programme, and the national body of expertise, done a lot of research on compostable liners, and obviously that's the key. Plastic bags, no, but compostable liners are fine. Yeah. And have found that that using a compostable liner does increase participation. Unfortunately, I don't know actually what the situation here, but many councils stop providing them free and ask the public to pay for them.
Yeah,
and
we get them online. So we just pay for them and get them online.
Yeah, so there is a barrier to that.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm sorry, Councillor White, but we've really got one more item to do after this. So everyone quite happy? I'm not sure we got a recommendation other than we fully support.
I think the recommendation is primarily around education.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah, maybe there's some pieces of work to take away off the line, maybe.
Yeah, and we wanted to get the data so that we know what we're working on from the SCP, because otherwise, there's no point in trying to do the work if you haven't got the information. Is there anything else that we need to do? Jack? No, you're sure? Because you're Councillor Long, I think I bow to your expertise in this field. I do my bit as a resident, but I don't do it with any.
To be a true recycling nerd.
Yeah, I certainly couldn't claim to be that, but thank you for your your advice and help, because it does tell the rest of us what we should be doing. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mark, and thank you for that. We will, Kim said earlier that she would send you all the slides so that you can see the presentation. And I think it's something that this committee basically should really get involved in and get worked up about in the nicest possible way, because I think it's something we'll all benefit from. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you to Claire, who sat there patiently through the whole thing, waiting to tell us about Sang. For those of you who are not into Sang in a big way, it's changed its name because it used to be Suitable Accessible Natural Green Space. And then they changed it to Alternative. It suddenly changed. And then they joined the green and the space together because we couldn't cope with an extra S.
Oh, really? It's Sang now.
It's not Sang, yes.
Oh, right.
You say it terribly quickly, David, you know, Sang, because you're not allowed to say green space, you know. It's too much for the children. So, Claire, if you could please explain what the reason I asked this to come, for those of you who are not affected on a daily basis by suitable, accessible, natural or alternative natural green space, is that you cannot build a house in Farnham or a dwelling of any kind without having some suitable green space to mitigate the harm that each dwelling is doing to the special protection area. So if the Sang runs out in Farnham, and we did have this before they actually had the policy, there was a moratorium in Farnham on all building because we couldn't mitigate the harm. And then we got it into Farnham Park, and naturally back that we extended that. But now that's running out because it is a finite. So Claire, if you could tell us where we're going on Sang in the borough, that would be great.
Okay, so there remains some capacity in Farnham Park. So I think the figure at the moment is 237 dwellings worth of capacity. And we are beginning to see some private sites coming forward. So we've currently got 2 sites coming forward that will mitigate development within the area that is covered by this issue. So just sort of stepping back from where we are, the options are for developers is that they either provide it on site, but obviously that comes with challenge because then you're using valuable land within the site as green space, as well as the play space and open space that you have to provide. And there is an argument that that isn't the best option because that means you're at a later date potentially having to look for the release of more green field to meet the housing numbers. There is the option which the council has already taken, and Guildford have a lot of examples of this, and Mark is beginning to learn an awful lot about Sang because we talk about it on a daily basis pretty much, don't we? Yeah. And where the council, you know, take an active role in securing land and then delivering Sang, and then also have the option to look at biodiversity net gain projects to support growth within their area. And then increasingly, not just within this area, nationally, there are bodies of companies effectively that are acquiring land and creating Sangs and actually marketing it to developers, all of which is fine because the council can secure the way it's delivered, and also can secure its provision and public access in perpetuity through legal agreements. So we've got the ability as the planning authority to make sure that it achieves the objectives in perpetuity, and in perpetuity sort of sometimes bounces between 80 and 120 years depending on where you are, which county you are.
How you can put a figure on perpetuity, I don't know. No, I know there was, but I don't know. That's complete madness.
But a different figure for biodiversity again, which is only 30 years. So there we go. So we've got some capacity left. We're seeing the market delivering, but also we're recognising that we need to play a more active role as a council. as part of the call for sites, one of the things land uses we're looking at is, have you got any SANG biodiversity net gain potential sites? So there will be potentially sites that come forward, and we don't have to take this through a local plan to allocate it because it's a planning application secured through a legal agreement. But also, we are going to be doing some more proactive work on our own assets to see how we can actually use our assets to enable and support growth in the delivery of our housing numbers.
I'm sorry to be so parochial here, but you know, Farnham is so badly affected because every single part of Farnham is affected by a spa. So you can't build anything. And I think your 237 is a bit optimistic because I'm almost certain since then, if you looked at the emissions since then, it'd be chipping in and I think we'll be down under the 200. But, you know, the point about it is we want to build, we're looking at the new local plan, and Farnham, like most of the other settlements, would prefer to build on brownfield site rather than greenfield. If the only alternative is another greenfield and another bespoke SANG, all we're doing is losing more and more green fields. Meanwhile, in the town centre, where there's brownfield, where you can't possibly do a bespoke SANG, if there is no capacity anywhere, then you cannot develop that piece of land. We have at the moment a regeneration project, which has only taken 20 odd years to come to fruition. Amazing how fast builders can build. But anyway, we've got Crest Nicholson's finishing off at Brightwells. Now that is going to change the dynamic in the town in some way. We don't know, might be good, might be bad. But we are going to have released in the town a lot of commercial property, either offices, shops, you know, all sorts of things that are going to want to come in for residential. And we, if we don't get more SANG, will not be able to deliver a single one of those dwellings on a brownfield site, because a brownfield site cannot produce its own SANG, has to buy into a SANG. And this is why in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, we put in the land east of Farnham Park, working with Waverley. We didn't just pluck it out of the air, and we had a fund for it, because if you use your own SANG, then the payment comes into you. If you use any of the other SANGs, you go through that rather complicated way of taking money and passing it on, don't you? It's a slightly more complicated process. So sorry to be parochial, but I just really want this subject raised and the reassurance.
Yeah, okay, so in terms of reassurance, I can't give you the answer that we've acquired X amount of land and we can build. I can't give you that answer because we're not in that place. What I can assure the committee is this is something that is being taken very, very seriously. And I'm not joking when I say I've been talking to Mark about it pretty much since he arrived. It's something that I've got a lot of experiences from my previous authority in delivering delivery as the council and actually creating a team to do that delivery. So it is very much in the focus of what we're talking about. We've had some conversations with the Section 151 officer in terms of how we maybe look at a sort of spend to save type arrangement when we set budgets going forward, so that we can actually resource, because again, in part it comes down to resource, because this won't happen because few officers are doing their best to try and make it happen. So all those conversations are in train. I'm just this evening can't say to you, and here you have it.
I wasn't expecting that. I'd love it, but I wasn't actually expecting that.
But you know, hopefully that does give you the confidence that we are.
Because our SANG policy is completely out of date because it changes.
So I was just going to say, to my knowledge of all this, living in a very rural ward, is really kind of. I've got some really basic questions, and I was wondering if we could have some training about how
I was
it works,
thinking that,
because it sounds a bit like offsetting. And
it is.
Yeah,
it's exactly what it is.
It is.
No, it is.
But there are really, really strict parameters to it, so it is.
I'd love to understand that better.
Yeah,
so we could have
really,
some training.
really happy to do a training session on it.
Please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Really happy to do
Councillor
that.
Booker just.
Oh, sorry. You're
Thank you,
nodding.
Chair. Just a very quick question, if that's all right. So the new or the proposed SANG in Chillingfold, which delighted with. And it's the perfect solution. We actually found a couple of potential sites within the village, but it's it borders the actual development, and I believe there wouldn't be a need for any car parking because it would be based on local footfall.
Absolutely.
But the question was, because from, I don't know exactly, but from the size of it compared to the development of 83 homes, it seems pretty big. So how does that work? And can another developer use that same SANG, and how would that how does that transaction work?
So on sites where there is over provision, as long as that is totally understood at the beginning, then within the legal agreement we will write in that the mechanism for the developer or the landowner to then effectively push it through. And then what if we then record the amount of capacity we've got across the borough. And then if a developer is saying, when they come in for a standalone scheme, saying, okay, I've got 20 houses and I need 2 square metres of SANG. I've talked to Mr. X who's got SANG Y there. And then you then look at in that planning permission to do probably use something like a Grampian style condition to say you can't occupy till you've demonstrated that the SANG is there and it's deliverable, etc. And then you sort of use the credit that we then log and say, I've got 2 beams of credit there, here's my proof of it. And then we just monitor all that through our sort of 106 monitoring process.
And if the parish council are managing the SANG, but it's, I don't know, a different parish is, the development is in a different parish, but they're using the SANG. But this parish council is running, then presumably there's some sort of contribution to the running costs of it, or?
It depends what the capacity is, and maybe that's.
I was going to say, maybe
we have a
training-
conversation outside,
Yeah.
because we begin to get into
Well,
a
yes, I think it's
level of
time
detail
we
that-
should go home. But just to say that when they started all of doing this, when Natural England suggested that bespoke SANGs could be part of it, there were some disasters, because basically they put them in, the management company said, oh yeah, we'll look after it, and nobody did. And we've got this one in Moor Park now, which ought to be a treasure, and it's a disaster zone. And one of the reasons Natural England liked local authorities to have a say in the SANG was because on the whole they would look after it. Very quickly, Councillor White, we're all falling asleep here.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Well, it's all right. I won't let you fall asleep. Another farmer night, really, isn't it? It's talking about, but just a couple of things on SANG, which I think is quite interesting. We do have Church Crookham, Carol. So Church Crookham, I mean, on the development that I live on, we pay £160 a year for the privilege of SANG at Church Crookham. And we have to make our own way over there if we want to use it. But there we are. The developer gets £160 a year for the privilege of that. The other point that I wanted to make is that we've had this recent situation, those on the planning committee will be aware, the Farnham East, or Farnham Park East, the burial ground there. That was a situation where I believe was offered as SANG land, and Waverley Borough Council were outbid. Hence it went to the burial ground. That's my understanding. And really just a question to Claire. Claire, I mean, as a planning authority, as Borough Council, and interested in finding SANG land, as Carol pointed out, can we get any help with purchase of SANG land, or are we always going to be a position where a developer is going to have twice the clout and will always walk away with the land? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, there's no sort of government help or anything in that form. So it would be down to, as I've described, talking with the 151 officer, putting forward a business case of how you can actually create it as a business model to actually sort of recover the cost involved in the purchase. But ultimately, if you're in a situation where you've got someone else that wants to acquire the land for other purposes, that's just the way the free market works, and we're not going to be able to secure land if someone's willing to pay more money or over the odds for that piece of land.
We'll never know, might win the lottery, in which case I'll buy it myself and my own little song and let it out. We've got a recommendation, I take it, to have some training on this. Because it is quite a big issue and it's an important issue more important in certain parts of the borough than others, but it does affect now the whole borough. When we first did the policy, the Wealdon Heath Spa was actually not very well protected at all. It was done on a, site by site basis because it wasn't under threat. And now, all the spas are under threat. We've really got to get it, get it up to speed. Thank you, Claire. You have been incredibly patient, absolutely charming to the end. And thank you, Mark, too. And obviously Jake and Kim and members of the committee. Oh, and you, Councillor White. See you out there. Thank you very much indeed, and have a pleasant journey home, those of you who've got to drive.
Thank you.
Good evening all.
Thank you.